Max Verstappen, what can we say? He hasn't even won every race this year, and yet somehow it feels as though he has. Because when he's won, he just does it in a dominant fashion. He won the Monaco Grand Prix by 30 seconds in a very tricky race, running his medium tyres over 50 laps and then surviving the rain on those heavily used tyres without making a mistake, before pitting for Inters and then just walking away with the race. It was controlled, measured, and ultimately he had the race in full control from the start. Sure, the Red Bull RB19 is a masterpiece of engineering, but Verstappen takes it to another level, and it's hard to imagine anyone but him lifting that World Championship trophy at the end of the season, even at this early stage. Fernando didn't quite have the pace of Verstappen today in his Aston Martin, but he gave it everything, and once again Mr. Consistent brings home yet another podium for Aston Martin. They're having a really good season, at least with one driver. The best result really they could have achieved. There was one mistake in the stops though, when they pitted Fernando for mediums rather than inters when the rain started falling. It was labelled as a miscommunication, but then after this he had to stop a second time for the wet tyres. And I do wonder if he'd put on inters during their first stop, if he'd have been able to leapfrog Verstappen. Probably not, in fairness, but I think he would have been a lot closer and you'd have certainly put him under pressure. Also, an impressive drive from Esteban Ocon. He rounded out the top three, finishing exactly where he started. And while he was holding the pack up early on as Verstappen and Fernando bolted away, he did everything he needed to do to bring that car home comfortably in third place. It was very impressive from him, and it was really nice to see another car on that podium. I think Mercedes will also be pretty happy with their fourth and fifth place for Hamilton and Russell as well. Although Russell was annoyed, he threw away a guaranteed podium as he described it. Essentially, Ocon and Lewis had already pitted as they both started on the mediums. They pitted for the hards, whereas Russell started the race on the hard tyres. And when they pitted, they dropped behind Russell on the road. Like I say, Russell was on the hard tyres, so he was going long. Long story short, when the rain came, Russell pitted for inters, as did his teammate Hamilton and Ocon. But because he had track position, as he hadn't done his pit stop yet, he actually leapfrogged both of them. Both Ferraris were late to stop for wet tyres as well, so both of them fell backwards. But Russell made a mistake going into turn 5, had to use the escape road, and then he did an unsafe rejoin when he came back on the track, making contact with Sergio Perez, and that earned him a slam dunk and well-deserved 5-second penalty. That mistake meant that Ocon and Hamilton both got back past Russell. Ultimately, Russell's penalty didn't matter either, as he was well up the road from the next place car. Both Ferraris had a bit of a rough day though, Carlos Sainz especially. He made contact with Ocon early on, which was an optimistic move at best, and then he stopped early to cover off Hamilton, which he was not happy about, as he started on the hards and he felt it impacted his strategy. He eventually ended up in 8th place and Leclerc came home in 6th. Sainz would have finished higher if it wasn't for a little spin he had into turn 5 when the rain came. We also have to mention the McLaren drivers of Norris and Piastri as well. During the last part of the race, on the intermediate tyres, they were the fastest cars on track by a long way. A great result for them, bringing both cars home in the points in 9th and 10th. Now we should probably just mention some really bad results of the day. Perez and Stroll. Stroll and Perez had some of the worst races I think I've ever seen and that I can remember. And Perez certainly won't want to come back to Monaco anytime soon. I'm not sure if he lives here, but he might want to move. He started in last place due to his crash in qualifying, and he stopped early to get off the mediums and go long on hard tyres. I guess his plan was to go until the end of the race. He had contact with so many cars, he hit so many walls, he ended up going through the pits at least 5 times, and ultimately finished the race in 17th, well outside the points, and he was lapped by his teammate and honestly most of the top 10. Lance Stroll also had a terrible race. He seemed to be hitting every wall in sight, with a comical scene of events on the intermediate tyres when he went deep into the hairpin, hit the wall, broke his wing, and then because the wing was wedged under his car, he then went like a pinball and just hit the next wall down there. It just epitomized Lance Stroll's day. It was not one to remember. And especially when your teammate is in 2nd, doesn't look that great. So, Monaco is done for another year, and the rain did at least spice up the last part of the race. But if no one can beat the Red Bulls at Monaco, or should I say no one can beat Max Verstappen at Monaco, I'm not sure they can beat him anywhere.